Hey everybody, before I get started, I just want to mention a couple of ways that you can engage with me on a more personal level. I have a few avenues set up and I keep focusing on one, and I figured why don't I make a short little video talking about all of them real quick before we get into these episodes. So first thing, Patreon. There's a link in the episode description, in every episode description to the Patreon, as well as a video on the feed called Major Announcement that has all the details of what each tier offers and how much they cost. I implore you to check that out. I offer a lot of cool shit for my patrons. Second thing, the Discord channel. There's also a Discord link in the episode description and in every episode description. I have multiple channels set up there for each show that I'm covering, and it's a great way to just engage with me. I have a channel set up for MMA talk as well. I'm a big MMA fan, so if you're an MMA fan, you can check that out as well. There's a link to the Discord in the episode description. And then lastly, the Facebook and Twitter. Social media. Follow me on there. I post news on there. When I say news, I mean like, hey, I'm stopping covering this show. Hey, I'm starting covering this show. Let me know what you think about this. I do live watches of things on Facebook where like I'll check in and say I'm watching so-and-so show, and then I'll like live comment while I'm watching it, and that'll be cool if maybe you watch that show too and you want to watch along with me, or you're watching it later and you will see my thoughts, which are usually pretty entertaining because I'm usually pretty high when I'm writing them. So check out all those links in each episode description, and let's talk about this episode. Peace.
One mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, and today I'm here to talk about Season 5, Episode 3 of FX's Fargo, entitled The Paradox of Intermediate Transactions. Now, I know most people don't even know that episodes have titles, let alone what the titles are or why they're chosen. And I kind of like to dig into those titles and see like, okay, why was this chosen? Like, because that's something intentional. You know, if you're a creator, why did you choose this title to define your episode? That's why I try to open every video that I do explaining why the title is what it is, if I can figure it out, if it's not super obvious. I read this title, watched the episode, and said, man, I'm not even going to try to make sense of this one. I'm like, the paradox of intermediate, what the fuck? But I Googled it, and you know, it's a real thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the definition to you guys, and then we're going to talk about how this plays out in the episode. And it's going to sound like, it's going to start and make you go, I don't know what that has to do with the episode. But by the time we're done, I think it should be pretty clear if you were paying attention. But if not, I'm still going to explain it. So let's see. So I'm just going to read. I'm going to read directly what I found. I actually found it on IMDb, surprisingly, and not Google. But quote, the paradox of intermediate transactions describes the effect of intermediaries or middlemen on the overall economy. The paradox states that while these transactions contribute to economic growth and provide opportunities for business, which help the economy, they also introduce inefficiency and result in higher prices for consumers, which hurts the economy. Now, time out. At this point, you may still be going, okay, still waiting for how this has anything to do with this episode of Fargo. Let's continue. For example, a product might go through multiple intermediaries before reaching the consumer. Each intermediary adds a markup to the product's price, increasing its cost along the way. This leads to a situation where the final price of the product is significantly higher than its original value. And if you haven't figured it out by now, this, I think, is referring to the increased cost to Roy for Munch to find Dot, given that he lied about just how much of a tiger she is. You know, in episode 2, this being Munch, just seemed like a low-life henchman upset about not being paid enough for a job that turned out to be much more difficult than he expected. But and then we also had that cool scene where he escapes almost being killed by Steve Harrington. So of course he's going to feel extra super duper slighted. Like, you lied to me so that you could pay me less about how big of a problem your wife was. You didn't tell me it was your wife. And now as a thank you for me getting my face sliced up because you lied, you now send your little piece of shit kid to try to kill me. Fuck you. This is going to go really poorly for you. And that's the paradox of intermediate transactions. The price is now significantly fucking higher for Roy. And now in episode 3, we learn that this isn't just any ordinary hitman. You know, I said in my last video in the in the description and at some point probably in the video, I said, I don't know how supernatural this is gonna get. Well, those words are weighing pretty heavy right now. Much comes from a long line of sin-eating motherfuckers who date back to 16th century Wales. And so let's talk about what I think we found out in a flashback. So we see this flashback where someone who looks a lot like Munch is performing a ritual in which a poor person agrees to essentially eat the sins of a dead person, pointing their soul so that the dead person can go to heaven sin-free. In exchange, the poor person gets enough money to buy half a peanut, and that's how Munch's ancestor was able to get a meal. He ate 18 motherfucking sins, and in present day, we see Munch kind of, digging into that ancestry, doing some sort of ritual that involved what looked to be goat or sheep. I couldn't tell. I was watching it on a TV that wasn't the best one, but and then in a little bit of camera trickery at the end of the episode, I think he shows up at Roy's house looking to extract that payment in probably another way. They shoot it in a way that makes you think it's Gator and his crew arriving to Dot's house, but we know that house is set up like Home Alone, and the house Munch enters appears to either be empty or at the very least everyone's asleep. And I think in the montage leading up to that, I think we see Roy's wife putting the kids to bed. So something to that effect. That's probably where he is. We also see Munch kind of like Christopher Columbus someone's house. We follow this elderly woman home, only for her to discover Munch upstairs, and he simply says, I live here now. And he doesn't even say, you gotta go. It's just like, yeah, you're your new roommate. And later, when he leaves, he refers to this woman as his mother, but he's very clearly not altogether there at this point. It seems like he may just kind of commandeered the home, especially given that the woman went downstairs, appeared to think about calling the police, but changed her mind. I don't know if she is literally his mother. That wasn't the reaction that I got from her. I got from her, I'm an old ass woman. He seems dangerous, but he's also not doing shit. I'm gonna let sleeping dogs lie because if I fuck with things, this guy might kill me, and I'd prefer to live out my remaining 36 hours, however much time she got left, in peace. And that's kind of how I got it. And I think that he called her mom or whatever just because he's fucking crazy. But it might be his mother. I don't know. But also, I don't think it matters anyway. It's a creepy scene. Yeah, and who she actually is, I don't think, at least at this point, it doesn't matter. If she actually is his mother and we see some more scenes of them together, yeah, sure, obviously it don't matter. But I kind of suspect that we're not going to see her anymore, and that this was just a woman who was unfortunate enough to cross his path, as we see in previous seasons of Fargo, when you have kind of like this force of nature villain character that I didn't think we were going to have one this season, but it's very clearly Munch right now. That's kind of what happens when you have these characters that people just are unfortunate to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I feel like that's what this elderly woman was experiencing. Also, speaking of the Home Alone scene that we're all looking forward to, if I did have one complaint about this episode, it's the fact that I feel like they set up the Home Alone shit last week for this episode, and they just kicked it down the road another week to the next episode. Like, I was getting really fucking hyped up for that. I'm like, yes, here we go. It's time. And then I paused it and I saw there was like 4 minutes left of the episode. I'm like, fuck. Like, they did it again. Like, got me hyped for the fucking Home Alone shit. And they delayed it another week. But aside from making me wait another week to see Dot turn Gator and his crew into Marvin Harry, this was another really enjoyable and suspenseful episode that is continuing to build tension and drive this story toward what's sure to be some magnificent violence. Not even just next week, but probably for the entirety of the season. And then also this week we learned a lot more about the central characters, like what I said about Munch in the opening and how we learned about his ancestry in Wales. And I don't know about you guys, but everything I'm learning about these characters is making them more interesting and more fun to watch. So starting with Joe Keery's Gator. He continues to be a lot more Joffrey-like, spouting all sorts of tough guy bullshit at Whit Farr, the recently shot Whit Farr. Like, you gotta be a real coward to play tough guy to someone with crutches. But he does this after he's caught stealing evidence. We also see him psyching himself up in his bedroom, a bedroom that looks like it will belong to a 15-year-old, by telling himself that he's a winner over and over. Couple this with his need to build confidence in himself, with the fact that his father comes down on him really hard for allowing Munch to get the drop on him not once but twice. And you know he's got a lot to prove before he walks into Dot's house next week. I just want to know who's going to get glenned by Dot's Negan next week, because that bat with the nails in it was looking very enticing. Not for me, like as a potential victim, but enticing to see it be used. We also learned that when he's not... Oh, sorry. No. No, I want to talk about Roy now. So we learn more about Roy. For starters, his wife, her name is Karen. They have 2 twin girls together. He has a father-in-law named Odin. Great name. Seems to be planning some sort of insurrection with some guns that he thinks he's going to be getting from Roy. We also learned that when he's not staring at the ceiling, obsessing over Dot, that Roy generally likes to get off into some role-playing. We get further evidence of what Roy thinks of women when his wife's role-playing suggestions are helpless hitchhiker and angry feminist. These seem like 2 types of women a guy like Roy would probably abuse, and given that episode 2, I think, strongly suggested that Roy beat Dot, it seems to be within reason that Roy's role-playing with his wife could possibly reach those levels of abuse as well. I do support Roy's smoking weed in bed stance, but I'm not a huge fan of his nipple ring stance. But we end the episode with Roy having sent Gator. It's important to note that he sent Gator with people that they trust to make another attempt at nabbing Dot, setting up what we could probably assume will be delicious violence next week, but we'll probably also have a few surprises in store as well. Moving on to Dot, we learned that her real name is Nadine, and she knows quite a bit about guns. In preparation for another attempt to kidnap her, we see her making a shopping list to take to Gun World. And I love the Gun World scene, starting with the guy behind the counter who's dressed like a pirate but is authentically missing an eye. I thought that was pretty cringe. I did have one teeny tiny issue with this scene, which is that I kind of found it implausible that Dot wouldn't know that there's a waiting period to buy those guns, given how much she clearly knows about guns, but not a huge deal. In other prep news, Dot also changes around all of the street signs in her neighborhood, which does effectively delay Gator a little bit later. Delay Gator later? Holy shit. She also changes their Halloween costume theme to a zombie hunter theme, which will presumably fit in perfectly with what we're going to see next week. Another thing that I found interesting, and this could admittedly be me reading too much into things, these scenes where Dot and Roy are just kind of like staring off into space, thinking about one another, it does seem like almost like they could actually communicate with one another, and I think that's kind of cool. It's like whenever Roy was thinking about or calling out to Dot, it was almost like she could feel it. So when he actually called her on the phone and was singing like that, I thought that was pretty ominous, and it worked really well with these constant scenes of them kind of like, where they kind of like superimpose shots of the other person while the one that we're with is like staring at a wall or a mirror or whatever. I thought the phone call kind of brought that concept to life. The last thing I want to talk about with Dot is the scene where the cops are talking to Wayne's mother in Danish. Actually, this isn't with Dot. This is just in general. They tell Wayne's mother that Whit is about to ID Dot as having been where we know that Dot was, and she doesn't seem to give a shit. She does this little mini rant about how the police only exist to protect the rich and important from the poor and meaningless. And, you know, they're gatekeepers, and behind those walls with the rich people, they have no power. They're worthless. Like, what is your value? You don't mean shit to me. And she kind of comes off like the main boss of a video game where you have to defeat a more powerful Karen on each level. And, but that shit's kind of true though. Like, and that was like low-key depressing. Like I feel like that's kind of an accurate assessment of reality. And I don't know. It's depressing to hear something where you're like, oh, that's terrible. It's coming from a terrible person, but it's probably true. But yeah, I mean, really strong episode. This show's awesome. I thought this episode kind of edged us when it comes to the Home Alone scene. I didn't appreciate that. I'm trying to get this nut off, but they gave us enough this week to sufficiently hype me up for next week, and I wouldn't be mad if the entire episode was Gator and his people at Dot's home and Munch at Roy's home, assuming that's where he is. I don't know what we'll see, but I will be here to talk about it next week, and until then, peace.